Hey everyone, welcome to But Why the podcast where we talk about the things in pop culture that people say matter and ask the question, but why though? Before we get started, we wanted to make sure that you take a minute to rate, review, and subscribe us on iTunes or wherever you listen. It's the easiest way for people to find us, and it helps us hear your feedback. Beyond that, come and join our conversation on Twitter at ButWhyThoughPC and on Facebook, facebook.com/ButWhyThoughPC. And if you like what you're doing and you want to support us a little more, head on over to Patreon, patreon.com/ButWhyThoughPC. And if a monthly subscription is too much for you, make sure you check out our t-shirts. We have t-shirts open on TeePublic and available for purchase on our website through the merch tab, butwhythoughpodcast.com. Enjoy the show. Welcome back, and today we're doing a follow-up episode to episode 57, Godzilla Matters. I forgot I had to change that name because I realized Godzilla is kind of the only thing that matters in a lot of ways. But we have a very special, amazing, talented guest here today, the King of Kaiju, Matt Frank.
Hey everybody! I'm using the power of the internet because I couldn't be bothered to show up in person.
So a little bit about Matt. He has done some awesome cover art, and he has been known as the go-to Godzilla artist for IDW Comics from 2011 to 2016. His covers include Godzilla Kingdom of Monsters, Godzilla Gangsters, and Goliaths, which I need to go pick that up because that title is like way too good to sleep on.
It's a really fun book.
Godzilla Legends, Godzilla Ongoing, and Godzilla Rulers of the Earth. And he also does concept art for Colossal Kaiju Combat, which is an action-adventure fighting game, and is currently the main artist and writer for Godzilla Rulers of the Earth. So he's very qualified.
Well, I appreciate that. Although I do have to say, sadly, Rulers of Earth actually ended 3 years ago. So I think that the wiki might be a little out of date there, which is contradictory to what I had just said before we started. Rulers of Earth actually, I was the main cover artist, main interior artist, and story co-producer for Rulers of Earth alongside Chris Mowry and our backup artist Jeff Zorno, and it ran from, I believe, 2013 to 2015, and we were the longest running Godzilla comic ever published. We beat Marvel's Godzilla comic run from the 1970s by one issue.
That's all that matters.
That is all that matters.
We were very petty. No, but thanks for having me. We met at where was it?
PAX South.
PAX South. That's right. We met through our mutual friend Veronique, and you guys started talking about how, oh yeah, we got a show and we're based out of the Austin area, and we were going to do a kaiju episode, and then I missed the kaiju episode because I couldn't figure out Twitter. So I'm really happy to be doing a little follow up.
Yeah, I'm happy you reached out because I was like, oh my god, we can't do kaiju yet, and then Pacific Rim came out or was about to come out. I was like, oh, we have to do it.
So we're glad you came.
Yes,
I'm glad to be here. I did. It's funny because we're really in an interesting environment right now for kaiju media because I've always attributed the reason that I have a career is because I started posting fan art when there was no kaiju stuff coming out. Between 2004 and 2014, there was like nothing.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that's called the empty decade or the dead age in the kaiju fandom. And I started posting art, and a lot of people were saying like, "Oh man, you're like the only source I'm getting for Godzilla goodness right now." So, but right now it's crazy. Now it's coming out of the woodwork. There's new Japanese movies being produced. There's new American movies being produced. We just saw Pacific Rim Uprising come out. Rampage comes out in 2 weeks, give or take.
Yep.
So, yeah, it's an interesting time. I thought I'd be dead before there was going to be a new Godzilla versus
revival
Kong on the horizon. Yeah. So, yeah, that's where we are right now.
That is awesome. So I do want to say, I do have some corrections from last episode. Like I did say in the episode, I was using multiple websites with some contradictory information when it came to Godzilla eras in alignment. I'm going to read what one of our, his Twitter handle is actually Kaiju66. One of the corrections he sent. Oh, you do?
Mm-hmm.
That's
I think
awesome.
we follow each other. But yeah.
Small world.
Well, I know everybody in this freaking fandom.
So I'm going to read what he sent me as a correction, and you correct the correction if need be.
I probably will.
From Kaiju 66, one thing you mixed up the eras in his role. Early Showa, he is when he was a villain in Ghidra, the three-headed monster. He starts his hero turn. By the time of Destroy All Monsters, he was full-on hero. Heisei Godzilla is the full-on force of nature / nature's wrath personified. He makes a bit of a face turn after Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla 2, but it was more accidental. Millennium era were unconnected films with the exception of 2 Mechagodzilla movies. He was a tweener in most but an absolute villain in Godzilla GMK. Final Wars was the final film of that era. I would also like to say this chat happened in our Discord, and then it went into full on talking about Godzilla in pro wrestling terms, which was amazing.
Yeah, you just said some terms, and I'm like, okay, I don't know what that means. And then you said wrestling. I'm like, oh, that's why.
Yep.
I only have enough room in my brain for so many fandom stuff.
I feel you big time.
Yeah, no, that's pretty accurate. That's the thing. So here's the thing about the episode you guys did. Now, I was just listening to it, and I was enjoying it. I liked you guys were entertaining. I will be honest, though. Every time, I think it was Matt who said that Godzilla was the only... I wanted to claw my own face off.
Wait. Hold on. Repeat that. Hold on. Repeat that, because you like Godzilla is, and then it went... Like
okay, I'm just gonna sit down. Every time I believe it was Matt who said that Godzilla was the only kaiju that mattered, I wanted to claw my own face off and throw myself down the stairs.
So I was right. I was initially right.
Now that's not to say that Godzilla isn't arguably the most important historically. But it's just that to me is like saying Superman is the only superhero that matters because he's the first one and sort of the archetype. Like, yeah. I would argue that the 3 Gamera movies from the 1990s are better than the majority of the Godzilla series. And there's a lot of kaiju fans in Japan who don't really even care about Godzilla. They're all about stuff like Ultraman and
wow.
Like I've had a lot of conversations with Ultraman fans who are like, Godzilla, it's all right, I guess. I mean, culturally important, and really, who cares? But that whole timeline is pretty accurate. I would actually argue that Godzilla wasn't even really a full-on hero until probably the 1970s, probably Godzilla versus the Smog Monster, because by the time the Smog Monster rolled around, that was when they were really pushing him as like the Seigi no Kaiju, which is the monster of justice, which is also what they called Gamera a few times. But even in Destroy All Monsters and even Godzilla's Revenge, which came between Destroy All Monsters and Smog Monster, he's still kind of a threatening presence. He's not not benevolent necessarily, but again, he's kind of got this anti-hero thing going on. Like in Destroy All Monsters, they had to confine him to Monster Island, or Monsterland rather, because he was a threat. And it was only by the virtue of the monsters hating the aliens more than hating humans that they turned on King Ghidorah at the end of the movie. It wasn't until Smog Monster that Godzilla was directly trying to help people and protect humanity. Did I say Destroy All Monster? Or did I say Smog Monster?
You've said both.
Yes.
Okay, well, Smog Monster is what I meant regardless. But anyway, yeah, no, but that's all fairly accurate. There's also a lot of conjecture about what is technically a kaiju. Because I actually have asked a lot of Japanese friends of mine, and I mean, I go there once a year, so I've got opportunities to ask. And there's not even really a consensus. Like, not everybody can really agree because, as you had said in the episode, it's more about the genre itself of film rather than what is technically a kaiju.
Yeah.
Really, a kaiju is just kind of whatever your universe decides a kaiju is. Like, and they don't even have to be big or fighting each other. Like, there's a black and white series that came out that came out just before Ultraman called Ultra Q, and it's basically the Japanese version of the Twilight Zone meets the X-Files.
What?
And it's pretty much all kaiju, but the kaiju aren't always destroying stuff. Sometimes they're just doing weird stuff. Like, there's one that's this weird interdimensional alien dude that's just running down the street with this like this crazy arm thing, and he's technically a kaiju. The genre is super nebulous and super kind of hard to pin down every now and then. But
so
anyway.
Speaking of that, we did get somebody as obviously our episode describing kaiju, and they came up with one of the weirdest thing of, Honey, I Blew Up the Kids. Would that be considered a kaiju movie?
No.
At least I was right on that one.
I mean, it's
well,
I mean, it's like the Cracked guys back when they, had a functioning website. It was like them saying like, oh, what's a kaiju? Is like the Twister from Twister a kaiju? And it's like, no, shut up. You're ugly and you're a communist. Exactly. It is a nebulous genre. Like a lot of, if you were to ask some Japanese fans whether or not the Titans from Attack on Titan are kaiju, they'd probably say, not really. They're Titans. They'd be like, no, they're Titans. Kyojin is sort of its own term. So anyway, I've been rambling for a while. I'm sure you guys want to get some words in edgewise.
No, I'm honestly enjoying just listening to you. Like, usually I'm the one rambling. So, like, I love this.
You are a guest. You are allowed to talk as long as you want.
Yes.
That's a mistake. I do a lot of my own rambling anyway. I have my own podcast called The Giganticast over on oneofus.net, and I take that as an opportunity to yell into a microphone about stuff.
And we shall include that in the show notes.
That would be awesome. Thank you. But yeah, and when I hear things like Godzilla is the only kaiju that matters. Now, to be fair, having an episode called Why Godzilla Matters is a great entry point to talking about why the genre as a whole matters.
Yeah.
Because you brought up, I love how so much of this is just me responding to the episode.
It's a follow-up.
Hey,
it's a follow-up.
And if we got something wrong, we do want to be correct.
Exactly. And I also only have...
Sure it is.
I also only have 4 questions to ask you otherwise, so keep going.
Oh, no, that's fine. For example, you talked in the episode about Colossal and how you thought that you really liked the monster in Colossal. Colossal is one of the best monster movies in the last 20 years, maybe 30 years. And because for me, it's an example of how versatile the genre is and how nobody gives the genre credit for being that versatile.
Thank you. Thank you, Matt, responding to other Matt for telling me that he disowned me.
It's now on the one hand, I do understand why the film is a little off-putting because it is so atypical for the genre. But as someone who has digested almost the entire genre, there's really only a handful of small blind spots I have. It was something the genre badly needed. In fact, the recent glut of kaiju movies, the Shin Godzilla, the anime, Kong Skull Island, Pacific Rim, and Colossal, these are movies that the genre is really needed for a while. Because back in the 60s, in the Showa era, it used to be that Toho, for example, would just come up with a genre of film and just put a kaiju in it. And that's why those movies are so memorable. Like, there's a ton of kaiju movies that a lot of people don't really talk about, but they should, but they don't talk about because they don't have Godzilla in it. And I think that's very reductionary because, for example, there's a movie called Dogora the Space Monster, and I always bring this up as an example. Dogora is referenced in the recent Godzilla anime. He's referenced in Planet of Monsters. Sorry. But basically, it's a movie about diamond smugglers. It's about diamond thieves. These people are these diamond thieves are trying to break into these vaults. They're on the run from the cops, but when they break into this vault full of diamonds, all the diamonds are gone because a space monster ate them. Because it's a space monster that feeds on carbon. And so there's this whole subplot going on with this floating jellyfish monster, and they have to kill it with bee venom. Like,
that's amazing.
It's awesome. Or Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster is another great example. Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster is a James Bond film combined with Roman Holiday. And then there's a monster war going on in the background. It's or Godzilla versus the Sea Monster is this crazy like Castaways. Gilligan's Island meets again James Bond because it was that era, and then there's kaiju. So that's what I talk about whenever I want to hold up stuff like Colossal, because I'm like, this is the sort of stuff this genre needs to be experimenting with. Like Skull Island. Skull Island is it's a Vietnam War movie on Skull Island, and it's also this. Can we curse on this?
Yeah, feel free.
Okay.
Be you.
It's this badass origin story for this superhero version of Kong. And it's this total kaiju movie. It's Kong Skull Island is actually one of my favorite movies from the last couple of years. It's so much fun. Anyway, I've been talking for a while. So I think that this opens up a perfect, like an amazing segue into one of the questions I did want to ask you, because like, obviously I think a lot of the way that like we were conceptualizing kaiju themselves, and like initially, like I'm starting to feel like I should have gone with my gut and we need to do a separate kaiju episode, because in my head, I was like, there's so much kaiju out there and such like a whole bunch that I love, but they're not Godzilla. And then this one's in my ear, like playing Blue Oyster Cult's Godzilla, like from the other room, like while I'm doing my notes. quick interjection. While I do like Blue Oyster Cult's Godzilla, that did introduce me to Blue Oyster Cult as a whole, and one of my favorite is Don't Fear the Reaper, which I think is one of the greatest songs of all time.
Yes. I agree there.
Yeah. So anyway, please continue.
Yes.
That's a fair assessment of Blue Oyster Cult for a lot of people.
Yeah. But yeah, so he's just playing that over and over, and he's just like, who's most important? Who's more like, so like that got in my head and I got in my head. But I do think that this opens up into a conversation that we ended up having on that episode about Western kaiju movies versus, Japanese kaiju movies. What is a kaiju movie, and like, do they have to be too monster heavy, or is this just us reacting to a lot of the really cut footage that we got from the original Godzillas and thinking that it's just monsters and nothing else?
That's a really interesting topic of conversation, because it's also kind of two different subjects, because Western monster movies, even in Japan, are still sometimes just called monster ega. Like Kong, for example, for a long time was well, it depended on which version of Kong you were talking about. Somebody would be like, "Oh, that version is just a monster. That's just it's just it's just Kong." But if you're talking about the Toho version of Kong or Kong Skull Island, it's like, no, that's the kaiju version. And again, there's no real hard and fast definition as to what it actually is. There are just certain tropes that the movies tend to fall into, like monsters fighting in cities, or friggin' whatever. Like there's a weird movie from I think it's the 60s called Daigoro versus Goliath, and it's this not terribly great movie, but it's entertaining in its own right. And it's about this baby monster whose mother was killed by the Japanese Defense Force. And so the Japanese populace felt bad that they killed its mother. So they've been having to dedicate taxpayer dollars to feeding and taking care of this baby monster.
I love this.
And then another bad monster shows up, and they've got to try to train him to fight this bad monster. And there's a whole Rocky running across the beach montage, but it's running through the snowdrift. He's like doing the punching and doing the it's hilarious and truly a hideous looking monster. Like if you thought Son of Godzilla looks bad, Mania looks bad, this thing is like somebody mashed a hippo into an accordion.
Oh gosh.
It's
that actually
real
sounds
bad.
kind of cute. It's
a cute movie, but it kind of meanders. But again, it's like you can kind of, and then like there's other movies that are kind of in this genre that are sort of kaiju adjacent, like Matango, Attack of the Mushroom People, which is you probably know what I'm talking about.
I know that one.
It is one of the greatest Japanese horror films ever made. It has incredible atmosphere and great acting, got an all-star cast from that era specifically. And it's this Gilligan's Island situation where these people are just washed ashore and they slowly all tear each other apart. And the whole while there are these sentient mushrooms pulling the strings from the shadows. And
I actually think you'd like that movie a lot. It's really cool.
It reminds me of like The Blob. I don't know why.
Yeah, and some would consider The Blob to be a kaiju movie, but is it? I don't know.
That movie is crazy because watching that as a child, like it's like a horror type movie, but then it's kind of like it's just a blob, and it's just weird the way they did that whole thing.
Really weird side note: as a kid, it terrified me, and then Flubber came out, and then Flubber scared me for a while.
Awesome. That's great. Because it's funny because I didn't actually see The Blob until I was in college, maybe, and when I finally saw it, I was like, oh. This is like a comedy. It's not meant to be taken seriously, and that's what I loved about it. Friggin' Steve McQueen is like supposed to be a teenager. He's one of those rowdy teens who he's gonna go off to make out point, and it's like, you are 39, or however old he was when he made that movie. But so. Anyway, I don't know. I hope that sort of answers the question. It's such a nebulous topic because
there are a lot of things to it and a lot of moving parts. And I think different people, like from what I'm starting to get, like from this conversation and also like from what we had on the podcast and even just like my disagreements with him, like specifically over Colossal, is that like, I'm thinking you're gonna like most people will qualify it for what fits for them and like what fits for like their entrance into the genre. Maybe
that's pretty much a totally appropriate point. Like I have friends who will argue until they're blue in the face that kaiju can only be Japanese. It can only be a Japanese film. And Okay, fine, but the kaiju in Pacific Rim are literally called kaiju.
Yeah,
And
because it was Guillermo del Toro's love letter to kaiju and mech anime.
yes, I have Kaiju, but it was when he started speaking my language that I was like, okay, I think I'm on board with this guy, because I listened to the commentary track on Pacific Rim,
It's
and
so good.
he name drops Toll Narita. And for those of you who don't know who Toll Narita is, he was the designer of the monsters from Ultraman. And that's a deep cut. I have his art book,
Yeah.
and he's like this fine artist turned monster designer. And it's incredible. I still maintain that the Japanese have the best production design in the world. I don't think that Americans may have more money they throw at stuff, but the Japanese make up for it by having just pitch perfect production design. I saw Ready Player One recently, and although I was amused by it, it was an astonishingly ugly film considering how expensive it was. Like, it's some of the ugliest production design I've ever seen.
And I think a lot of that comes from my knowledge is I haven't. So I'm a huge horror. I'm horror trash essentially. I will watch any
Sure.
piece of horror that you put in front of me.
Right.
And so a lot of that has led me to find like my favorite genres of horror are like Japanese ghost movies and Korean revenge horror. Like those are two of my favorite subgenres.
Spooky, and not my bag. I can't
Yeah,
do it. I'm not a horror person.
Yeah, they're pretty bad. But the thing that I will realize that I realized watching a whole bunch of this is I'm going to tie back to Ready Player One. There's like this crutch that I think American movies have where they lean so much on what they can produce from CGI versus what can I do practical. And I think what I found in a lot of Japanese horror, like specifically, the production design is as intricate as it can get because it's about how can we bring this to life and make you feel it versus and for me like that's where it hits me, and I think that's why personally my favorite like director ever is Guillermo del Toro, because like he does everything as intricate as possible. Yes, I'm going to mention Guillermo del Toro on every episode.
Can I just say I love the way you pronounce his name. It's like the lyric of a Latin love song. Practical effects is definitely become something of a lost art form in America, although there's tons of people who still do it and do it really well. I mean, look at Shape of Water. I'm of the somewhat bitter opinion that CGI, people throw CGI into their movies, and people like to go see movies with a lot of CGI in them, not because they look better or more realistic. I mean, Black Panther, fun movie, but terrible CGI.
Are you going to talk about the rhinos? Because that's our co-host's biggest gripe with the CG. The rhinos.
Not just the rhinos. The entire final battle was just kind of this like unconvincing mess. But it's because they want their movies to look expensive. The more expensive it looks, the more people think it tricks people into thinking that it must be good. Like, you know, the Hobbit trilogy are three of the worst looking movies I've ever seen, because they're just a bunch of really ugly, crappy green screen. And that's not to belittle the hard work of all the individual artists that put into it. And that's also not to say that all tokusatsu is created equal. All live action Japanese effects are created equal. I mean, one of my favorite special effects directors is what's his name? He's been doing a lot of Ultraman stuff, and his name is Kiyotaka Taguchi. He's been doing whenever he's at the helm of like an episode of Ultraman, the special effects just will sing. Like he's combining CGI and practical effects and particle effects, and he's got all these great miniature shots, and he knows how to film with shaky cam, but also you know what's happening in it. But if he's not at the helm, you know, a lot of it's just kind of static shots of guys in rubber suits standing in the middle of model buildings.
Yeah.
So it's I think it's just a question of the specific vision of the person behind the lens and what they're bringing to the table. And I think that's kind of what's important. That's the way it's always been. But
yeah. I think it also helps too, like in my mind, like how many people are touching that piece of CG, right? Like how many people have it from concept to like to execution. So like thinking about like the kaiju and Pacific Rim, they're beautiful. They're beautiful, but you can also tell that looks like something, at least in my opinion, that like was sculpted out first and like made sure that every single detail in the CG matched the sculpt.
Yeah, absolutely. The first Pacific Rim movie, before that movie came out, I was vehemently anti-CGI, especially when it came to kaiju. I was like, nope. See, it's tokusatsu all the way. But then I saw that movie and I was like, okay, all right, Del Toro, I see where you're going with this. So I appreciated that, but then I saw Pacific Rim Uprising, and I was like, these might as well have just been guys in suits, because it's not really any sense of scale here, because they made this for like almost half the budget of the first movie. So I didn't dislike the movie. I thought it was, again, like Ready Player One. It was fine. I was entertained by it, but it just didn't have that oomph to it. It didn't have the thing that I think made a lot of people fall in love with the first movie. Yeah. You said you had some questions, though, and I feel like we could circle back around to that.
Yes. So the big question is, why kaiju? Like, why do you have like an island of kaiju behind you?
I think for a lot of people, it's like kind of like anything else. You kind of just lock in on it when you're a kid. Like a lot of us, when we were kids, we really liked dinosaurs, and kaiju are sort of this next step beyond that, because dinosaurs were like these real life monsters that actually existed. And that's what makes them so cool and special. And they're these things that aren't around anymore. And kaiju are an extension of that. They're an extension of monsters that are representational of aspects of the world we live in. And it's not, I guess for me, it's sort of like asking someone why Star Wars or why Marvel Comics, or it's just this thing you sort of dive into. And I was also very fortunate, because as a kid growing up, and I think we're all kind of from the same generation, we grew up with basically being raised by Japan. Almost all of our media as kids was Japanese. Anime, Power Rangers, Dragon Ball, Pokemon, Digimon, Transformers to a certain extent. I'm trying to think. All of our video games came from Japan. Yeah. Like everything, we were inundated with this stuff. And
I did not ever think of it like that until just now.
Sure,
yeah, it totally makes sense. I hadn't either, and now I'm like, oh crap! My entire life was shaped by Japan or American cuts of Japanese material.
Exactly, but enough of that unique cultural perspective was retained to Sailor Moon, had this completely weird dub job that is hilarious in its own right.
You leave Sailor Moon alone.
I love it. I love Sailor Moon. I love both versions.
Sailor says.
And yeah, and then but they retained enough of that specialness to, they understood what was appealing about it. And that's the thing that's to be said about adaptation. Like, it's funny, because I came to that conclusion about Japanese media after having so many conversations with my dad about Japan, because now he grew up watching, he used to watch monster movies. He used to watch Gamera and Godzilla and stuff on Saturday mornings when he was a kid. He wasn't a big TV kid. He was I'm going to go outside and fight bears kid. My dad is
fight bears kid. Okay.
My dad is as old as Godzilla. He's going to be turning 64 this month, and he is still surfing, snowboarding, and wakeboarding. Yeah. We just went surfing this past weekend, down at the coast at Port Aransas. that's just to give you some perspective there about the kind of childhood I had. He and I will talk about Japan, and inevitably the conversation will turn around to World War II. And now he respects the country a lot. He loves the Bushido code. He loves the culture. He loves the food. He really wants to go. I'm going to try and take him and my mom sometime. But it always circles back around to World War II because that was the only major cultural touchstone for him as a kid when it comes to Japan, was the war.
Yeah.
And for a lot of people, it's true for a lot of people from that generation. Even people who grew up on Godzilla and growing up, I've talked to people who used to go to the drive-in movie theaters and watch Destroy All Monsters in its first run. Or my buddy Lee, who found a paper clipping from, he gave me this paper clipping of when Rodan was being shown at his theater in San Antonio when he was a kid. And I'm like, holy crap, it's this completely different cultural perspective. And then us, we're like, oh, Japan's not the enemy that we bomb the crap out of. There are fun neighbors who have all the cookie stuff and the cool toys. It's like Disneyland.
Hello, Kitty.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think that's a big part of it too, because it's this kind of built-in cultural window that you can then dive in and just really get because I'll be honest, a lot of other pop culture stuff, I don't really give a crap about. I don't really care about Star Wars. I don't really.
I like him more.
My wife too. My wife was like, whatever, Star Wars. Like, where's Picard? Where's Picard? Oh, this isn't that Star thing.
I love them both.
And there's nothing wrong with that. There's plenty of love in the world for everything. So anyway, that's kind of my roundabout, long-winded answer, because it's just right place, right time, right cultural impact, and right amount of obsession with dinosaurs.
Yeah.
The dinosaur thing is definitely very well.
Is that why you like Godzilla?
Yeah, I mean, dinosaurs are cool. Sure.
I've got a Jurassic Park shelf over there.
Yeah.
I've got a Papo dinosaur shelf over there.
I started making memories about when Jurassic Park came out. I mean,
oh man, I've got the old Kenner, Alan Grant, and Ellie Sattler action figures on their cards on my wall of my studio.
It's so amazing that people keep and collect them. Like, I had these toys, and then I just dispose of them. Like I thought we did with toys, and then I grew up and realized, oh no, apparently people collect that, and it's a shame to play with them.
Side note. I love things and I want to collect so much, but my only problem is that like I'm the person who buys it, rips it out of the box, and just starts playing with it immediately, and then everybody stares at me.
Oh
like,
no!
What are you doing? Why is it out?
I do the same thing. All my Transformers are out of their packages because I like transforming them, and
why do you buy a Transformer if you don't transform it?
The only ones I have that are still in their boxes are the Beast Wars 2-pack with Optimus Primal and Megatron.
Beast Wars? See, he mentions Beast Wars. Like, I mentioned Beast Wars because it's cool.
I didn't have a problem. I like Beast Wars.
Yeah, I was going to say, Beast Wars is far and away one of, if not the best Transformers television series, aside from maybe Transformers Prime.
Where have you been? Because we did a Transformers episode and they made fun of me for
not. I agreed with you on this.
Okay, well, Adrian harped on me for loving Beast Wars the most and saying that it is amazing.
It was my generation one.
This episode.
Yay! It was my first real exposure to Transformers was Beast Wars, and it was actually my first job for IDW was doing Beast Wars character art for a big source book they did. Yeah, I emailed their editor-in-chief, Chris Ryle, who actually just quit their company after 10 years. But I emailed him with my portfolio back when I was in college, and I'm like, hey, I'm just starting out. I'm a fresh-faced young artist. I'm looking to work with you guys. I really like Transformers. Can I work for you guys? And they said, and Chris Ryle said, yeah, you've got good stuff. Send me some Transformers stuff, though. So I scrambled to put together Transformers art in the 10 hours between emails and sent them back. And he's like, all right, let's do this. So I've done a few Transformers things as well. I'm a big fan.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
You were so cool.
I am wildly uncool. No, but anyway, so questions though. You said you had questions.
Yeah, so next question. Since the name of the episode was Godzilla Matters, and our entire thing is, but why?
But why though? ¿Por qué?
Why does Godzilla matter to you?
For me, it's a lot of things, because as a kid it was just an obsession. It was just this rabbit hole that was like, it was a source of knowledge that only I had, because everybody else knew what all this other crap was, everybody else knew the comics or the video games or the anime and stuff, and I liked all those things, but Godzilla was my thing, and I think a lot of other Godzilla fans can attest to this. That
I was gonna say, I feel like that too when I was a kid, but then I just like lost track of Godzilla as I went up. Yeah, I feel like nobody else liked it when I was a kid.
I mean, trust me, you've got to be a special kind of obsessed to hang on to it the way I did. It also helped that I discovered all of these forums and fan groups and stuff that also really liked Godzilla, and I sort of stayed on with them and locked in with them, and that allowed me to. And I also used to read G-Fan magazine. I still do. And now I go to G-Fest every year, which is the big Godzilla fan convention in Chicago. But now it's not just a fan thing. Godzilla is the reason I was able to buy a house. Godzilla is the reason I have a career. I took this passion that I had and this obsession that I had and channeled it into a focus for my career to be one of the only guys in America who does Godzilla as much as I do. It's not the only thing I do, but I do it more than anybody else. The only other artists I can think of who are associated with Godzilla in any way in America are Bob Eggleton, Jeff Zornow, and Art Adams. Art Adams doesn't do it as much as he used to. He did a bunch of Godzilla stuff for Dark Horse back in the 90s, but he's still like the best Godzilla line artist out there because it's so intricately detailed. And then Jeff Zornow was my backup artist on Rulers of Earth, and a great artist in his own right. He's done a lot of Godzilla stuff, not to the sheer volume that I have, but he does a lot, and he's really, really good. And then Bob Eggleton is an acrylic painter who did the old Random House Godzilla novel covers. These beautiful acrylic painted covers and stuff.
Those.
And you might, if I were to send them to you, Godzilla fans listening will know who Bob Eggleton is. Like, I'm trying to think of some other stuff. He's done a bunch of famous Monsters of Filmland covers.
That's where I know him from. There we go. Yeah.
Yes, he's done a lot of really excellent stuff. And Bob has sometimes called me the son he never had, which makes me really happy because like we become friends after I actually became a professional artist and not just some schmuck. I'm just kidding. But no, so as a result, Godzilla sort of has become this cornerstone of my life and this thing that's sort of been holding me up. If it wasn't for Godzilla, things probably would have taken a very different turn. I could be getting shot at in a desert right now because I very nearly was pressured into joining the army before the whole art thing kicked in.
Wow.
But that's a story for another day. I do have one anecdote about Godzilla, and that I think really does summarize a feeling that a lot of fans have. Is when I was a kid, I hadn't really seen any of the movies. I had sort of seen, I was really young. I was probably pretty much in early single digits, maybe 6 or maybe 5 or 6. And I had this little Godzilla, this Imperial Godzilla figure. You used to be able to get them in stores everywhere. And I remember my parents took me as like a special treat to this restaurant somewhere in San Antonio. I don't remember the restaurant. It's probably not there anymore. they had put one of those giant inflatable Godzillas that you see at like car dealerships in the playground behind the restaurant. And as a kid, you're like, that's Godzilla. This is what it's like to be sitting in Godzilla's shadow. And I just remembered sitting between his feet with my little Godzilla in my hand and just feeling very safe. Like it was it was basically like having a second larger dad. So I transfer a lot of the feelings I have about my dad and fatherhood to Godzilla, which is one of the reasons why I actually get really emotional when watching Son of Godzilla. Yeah, because it's kind of a dumb movie, and it's got a lot of really dumb stuff in it, but it's charming and fun, and it's got a really sweet ending. So that's in a nutshell for me.
Oh, my heart just grew. It's no longer cold and dead.
Oh.
My shriveled, dried husk of a heart. You'll never find it, Beowulf. No, we're getting off point. Anyway.
Okay. That was amazing. That is an amazing why, though.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
And I think, so the last one, it's a hypothetical.
Was that the last one for you, or can we ask more questions? I have 2 questions.
Oh, you can ask more questions.
Ahead.
I just put in on the one that I have there because I really want to hear what he has to say about that.
Okay.
Cool.
I guess the one is, what do you... I mean, I'm assuming you've seen the 2014 movie and the anime. Yes. What do you think of those 2 editions, I guess?
I'll start with the anime first and to just get it out of the way because I recently did a review of it on the Giganticast. So my feelings are out there. But
right.
It's I think it's a really interesting setup for a really potentially really cool and interesting universe. Haruo is a dick,
yes.
and I really hope some sense gets slapped into him.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because I mean, he got a lot of good people killed.
Yes.
And
glad I'm not the only one that felt that way.
Yeah, no. Me and my whole crew of people I had on that podcast, my wife included, we were all like, "Yeah, he's a psychopath."
Yes.
And he's dealing with some serious emotional trauma, and he's taking everybody down with him. I think it was a really interesting film. I really appreciated the effort. I really like the characters of Metphys, the alien that's sort of pulling the strings. There's some really interesting character stuff going on, but it's kind of buried under all of this technical stuff. It's a really tech-heavy episode of Star Trek with Godzilla thrown in.
That is so accurate.
Yeah, I can agree with that.
Yeah. I'm actually the co-director of the movie, and I follow each other on Twitter, which is really fun. But no, I saw it in the theater in Japan when it came out, and I remember not really following a lot of it because it's no subtitles, but that ending is really badass. I was really impressed by they went that hard into a cliffhanger ending. And so, yeah, I liked it. I thought it was pretty good. I'm really interested in what they're going to do with part 2. But the city on the edge of battle is part 2. And it's going to be Mechagodzilla.
Yes.
Nothing else past that, though. We don't get no spoilers.
We brought this up.
I don't remember you saying Mechagodzilla.
Yes, we did. We brought this up to the part 2.
Awesome.
Set up to Mechagodzilla.
Yes.
No, I don't.
Oh.
It's good.
Okay. Adrian and I talked about this on the episode. We knew that it was setting up to do this.
It's okay. No one's going to judge out loud. No. As for Godzilla 2014, that is a really excellent 30 minutes of a movie capped by a really super, super, super well-made, very short Godzilla movie at the very end. And the middle of the film just kind of falls apart because... Now, I interviewed Gareth Edwards for Toho Kingdom back in 2014. I got to talk to him at South by Southwest, and that was really cool. And I really like him as a director. I really think what he needs is to just surround himself with character actors and people who can carry a scene. Mm. Because Aaron Taylor Johnson needs a firm hand. Same thing, I guess, with... like
maybe a Bryan Cranston that you don't kill off?
It's so unfortunate because it's really clear that he was cast before all of this hullabaloo about Breaking Bad had gone down.
Yeah.
And the character of the
good Zordon.
He's all right. No, he was actually one of the better parts of that movie, and I like that movie.
Yeah.
But it's just that he's not a character. You need to fill that movie with characters on his level.
Yeah.
And I feel like the Godzilla 2014 had all the same problems that Rogue One had, but people gave Rogue One a pass because it was Star Wars.
Thank you.
And
I think
Rogue One was amazing, but that's only because I'm fascinated by the character of Cassian Andor. And like I think that he pulls me through the majority of it's my favorite, but mostly because he's like his alignment on like the D&D scale is like that makes me happy.
See, now hey, that's great. I am not one of those people. I am not one of those people. I would never want to take away something that somebody likes. And I know there are too many people out there who just want to have this sociopathic need to tear things away from people. I'm not one of those people.
Yeah.
I will say, though, that it didn't read to me as shifting alignments. It just read to me as bad writing. But you know what?
There are issues with it. Like, there are issues with it. There are hands down issues with it. That's the thing. On my end, I'm somebody who will love things, but also admit if they're bad or if there are issues.
Sure.
Which is like my way of loving.
But if you got something, if you got more out of it than I did, and that means that you had one more thing in your life that you liked that I didn't. So good for you. But yeah, with Godzilla 2014, I think it's I think my wife put it really well once we got out of the theater. When we first saw it, she said that was the most beautifully shot, excellently directed, cinematographically amazing, boring and stunted piece of crap I've ever seen. And I couldn't really argue with her because I think that the final battle is amazingly well directed and amazingly well shot, and it's super good, but it's almost like it's a different movie because it's
that makes sense.
It's so separated from the rest of the film. And the opening part with Bryan Cranston, my wife and I rewatched the film recently with some friends of ours, and she and I were talking during that opening part, and she said something in the effect of, I'm almost more angry now because this opening part is so good.
Yeah.
And it's so compelling and well done, and Bryan Cranston is so good in it. But you know what? They're building an entire cinematic universe off of 10 minutes of this movie, off of the 10-minute final battle. I'm okay with that. We're getting more Godzilla. That's all that matters.
That makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
At least I feel better about my opinions of those two films after listening to him, because I pretty much had, maybe not exactly, but almost definitely along the same lines.
Yeah,
I'm glad
Godzilla 2014, and it's actually like, now that it's in my head, thank you for putting this in my head. It is kind of a very accurate, it runs parallel to Rogue One in some of those ways now, and damn you.
They're both really well shot. They're really well shot, and they've got really great art direction. And Gareth Edwards knows how to use a camera and use CGI. I just don't think he's an actor's director. And I think that's going to be, but he's not even making big blockbusters anymore. He's gone off to go make his indie movies again. So whatever, he can do whatever he wants. He directed Godzilla and Star Wars.
That's all you need.
Yes. So yeah, I don't know if you guys had anything else, though.
I had one more question for your final big question. As far as, obviously you're talking about the art, what do you think of because I think we talked about this in an episode, I guess kind of either your favorite Godzilla of, I guess, the new concept art of how Godzilla changed. I guess what he looks like now versus old, and why I guess now he's kind of, I think we called him Poofy. We called him the Poofy Godzilla now.
The Poofy Godzilla.
Yes.
Which one is that?
He's a little thicker.
Specifically?
The new anime, he's very thicker.
Godzilla's always been a thunder thighs champion.
Yeah, that is true. I guess it's more of his upper body now. It's kind of.
Well, yeah. Well, they specifically the new Godzilla. I'm looking at my shelf now of all the Godzillas, and the new Godzilla is very specifically intended to be a functional animal, functional as a living thing, as opposed to Shin Godzilla, which is inherently functional, but it's more about the effect of a creature that looks like it's in a constant state of pain and mutation. So,
okay.
Because Godzilla's skin is supposed to be keloid scarring from radiation burns. That's why he has that texture. Yeah.
That's awesome.
And I mean, and I'm also thinking about a quote from Shinji Nishikawa, who is he was a designer for the Godzilla. He was a monster designer for the Godzilla movies from 1989 to 2004, and he's also my sensei. Like I every time I meet up with him, I call him sensei or Dai sensei, and he just is like, no. He came to my birthday party. Yay.
Oh, that is amazing.
Yeah, that's a whole other thing though. My favorite designs are probably going to be somewhere around the early 2000s. Like I really love the Godzilla 2000 design with those tall magenta-y back plates, these back spines, and this very feral looking face. I actually got interviewed by a Japanese magazine asking me to talk about the design, and that's basically I just gushed about it for like 2 pages. And it was a design. It was the first Godzilla, I believe, the first Godzilla designed by Nishikawa, and so of course it's kind of his baby. But I like all the designs because they're all a product of the environment and the production that they were made for. So it's a Godzilla for every season. It's a Godzilla for every kind of film you're making. If you want a goofier Godzilla movie and a goofy Godzilla in it, you're gonna go with the 1970s Godzilla with puppy dog eyes. If you want something that's more of an overt force of nature, you're gonna go with the Heisei Godzilla, which is almost regal and handsome in this lion-like way. Or you're going to go for something a little fiercer and a little darker, like the 2000 Godzilla or the GMK Godzilla, which has those white eyes and this very foreboding, menacing posture to its body, which is my other favorite design and my number one favorite Godzilla movie. Or you got Shin Godzilla, which is intended to basically be a horror version of Godzilla. So there you go. So there it is. My other favorite movie. So yeah.
Did that answer your question?
That's all I had.
Do you feel bad for calling him Poofy now?
Yeah. I mean, it's not like it's a bad design. It just is different.
He's thick. He's a thick boy.
Yeah, he's definitely a lot thicker than the before. That would be the thing.
Oh, sure.
I mean, like I said, we did make fun of the Batman.
Yeah, we do make fun of Poofy Batfleck.
He is. I miss what happened to like svelte, slim downed ninja Batman. Like, where did that go?
That's a good Batman.
Yeah.
I didn't need molded plastic to improve my physique. Pure West. God rest his soul. Anyway, so yeah.
Okay, so now it's the final question.
The final countdown.
I can insert. There,
I did it for you.
There you go.
Okay, so yeah, since you draw Godzilla and you love kaiju, if somebody gave you the reins of $100 million budget and you could write, create, and do anything you wanted with it for a kaiju movie, well, I won't restrain it to Godzilla. But kaiju movie, what would you do and why?
Oh, baby. I think I get asked this a lot on Tumblr and stuff, and I rarely have a good answer. Well, my first thing that comes to mind would probably be an adaptation of the last Godzilla comic I did, which was in 2016, which was Godzilla Rage Across Time. That was the last one I worked on that wasn't covers for the Japanese releases. And it was it's and it's unfortunate because not a lot of people got their hands on it. There was a major shipping error and a lot of issues just never made it out. But I think it's actually one of the best books I ever worked on because the book is set in, it's a kaiju story set in the Sengoku Jidai, set in the feudal warring states period. And the idea is that these samurai and this sort of folk hero have to team up, this ninja kind of character. They have to team up because the Mongols are invading, and they're invading through Fukuoka Bay, which is, of course, where which is where the term kamikaze comes from, the wind of the gods. Because it was a wind of the gods, it was this typhoon basically that came through and destroyed the Mongol invasion and saved Japan from a major incursion. But we rewrote history a little bit to where the Mongols had Gigan and Megalon at their disposal. And because I love those characters, Gigan, of course, our big hook-handed buddy, and Megalon, the big burrowing beetle. And so this samurai and this ninja were sent on a quest to find a monster that could defeat them. And they find one monster, may not be the monster they were thinking that they were going to find. I don't want to spoil it because it's actually like I said, it's one of my favorite books I worked on. Jeremy Robinson wrote it. He also wrote Project Nemesis, which he and I worked on a lot together. And those are really good novels. I recommend those to everybody. The great kaiju novels, if you want a really cool kaiju book. And I would make a big budget samurai feudal era kaiju movie because I feel like, because I'm also reminded of the Daimajin movies, which are a trilogy of films from the 60s that are about this big stone statue that comes to life and basically takes revenge on a local magistrate for oppressing the peasants in the area. And they're super high budget, and they've got great special effects and great miniatures, and they're basically samurai era kaiju movies. But I want to push that angle because there's so much rich Japanese mythology you can work into it. You can do Yamato no Orochi, the 8-headed dragon of Japanese folklore. You can do all these other Japanese creatures like kappas and all these other yokai and stuff like that. And then if you work kaiju in there, it would be great. So I just want a kaiju fantasy movie, basically. Like, that's kind of where I would want to go with it.
That sounds amazing, and I want it now. And I also want to go pick up that book because that sounds amazing. And
thank you.
Like, samurai anime is like probably one of my favorite things. It's up there with mechs and magical girls. So
that's awesome.
Somebody please give him $100 million budget to do this.
Yeah, no, after all the slagging off I just did about a bunch of major Hollywood productions, I'm pretty sure I'm a write-off at this point. But yeah.
I just want to like be there in the room when you come in, like, Godzilla, but
yeah, I mean, well, the thing that kind of inspired me to take the direction I did with it was because Okami is one of my favorite games of all time, and I actually based the entire art style of that issue of the comic on Japanese woodblock prints. So the whole book kind of has that quality to it, and yeah, so. If you can find it, it's Godzilla Rage Across Time. You should be able to find it on Amazon or eBay. Okay. The trade is out. The trade's pretty cool because it's basically an anthology of Godzilla stories taking place in different periods of Earth's history. And
I want that so much.
We did the first issue. So yeah, it's fun.
Yeah, so I'm going to try and find the trade and put that in the show notes.
Great.
because that sounds awesome.
Thank you.
And yeah, that's all I have. And this has been an amazing session of kaiju. And I'm just looking at all your figurines behind you. I see the Zords. And then on the other, behind or on your desk, I saw a Wasp figure, and I was like, "That's Wasp."
Oh yeah.
Seeing toys that I had that I threw away.
Oh sure, I hardly threw away. That is my original. Those are my original Megazords. Those I got those for Christmas when I was a kid. I held on to a lot of stuff.
I actually think the one. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say I still have my first Godzillas that my grandma bought for me. So
that's awesome. I think the one toy I wish I had was my Kimberly figurine from Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, where the head you flipped it.
Had all
they just re-released all of those.
They did?
You can go get them at Toys R Us before they all shut down.
I was like, isn't Toys R Us gone?
Nope, not yet. It's still kicking in Austin anyway. That I know of.
We need more figurines, Matt.
We have no more room for figurines.
That just means we need another shelf.
My wife is trying to get us to buy a new house because we don't have enough room for all this crap. But anyway, yeah. But yeah, this was a lot of fun. I really appreciate you guys having me on.
Yeah, thank you for coming on. And I have so many other ideas if you'll be willing to come on other episodes.
I just, it all just depends on what my schedule looks like. I blocked out this time so we could talk. I'm probably going to go back to work as soon as we're done though, because I've got I'm currently working on a book for the Ultraman company, for the company that owns Ultraman, called Redman, not the Wu-Tang Clan. It's an obscure Japanese superhero from the 70s that we are spearheading the revival of in Japan. And I'm doing a graphic novel for it. And
that is amazing.
I have to do 2 pages a day in order to make my deadline. So, especially if I'm gonna especially since I'm taking next weekend off because I'm going down to San Antonio for a big Rampage event. So
awesome!
Gonna be fun.
Nice. Cool. Well, thank you so much for being on here. Why don't you tell our listeners where they can find you and your work?
You can find me if you Google Matt Franken Godzilla. You'll find my stuff. But Kaiju Samurai on DeviantArt, Mattzilla85 on Instagram and Facebook, or is it Mattzilla 1985? I think it's just Mattzilla85. And Twitter and Tumblr is Spankzilla85. Very tasteful. You can also find me on oneofus.net, where I review movies, and I also have my own show, which is the Giganticast. And you can find me every week, just about, over on RageSelect.com, where I do Let's Plays and yell at my co-host Jeff because he doesn't appreciate some kaiju-related thing that he's like, I don't understand. That's dumb. You're dumb. Get off my show. No, he's not like that. Although I am currently tormenting him about Rampage because he was just like, the movie looks stupid, and I've been bombarding him with clips and action figure pictures. I bought all the Rampage action figures, and I've been taking them over to his house and be like, hey, Jeff, you like this? So, yeah, feel the weight of it. Feel the girth. Just like, anyway. So yeah, that's where you find me.
I feel like I need to watch that because you just described Matt and Maya's dynamic on our show. So.
That's awesome. That's very cool.
So yeah, as always, Matt, did you have anything you wanted to add before we sign off?
No, thanks for coming. Hopefully our episode did some justice.
Yeah. No, I here's the thing, and this is a good anecdote to go out on. You guys were putting in the effort. You were really trying. You were putting in the effort. If you ever need more comprehensive resources, I can tell you where to go because they are out there and they're relatively easy to find. It's just the problem is that whenever somebody like IGN or Nerdist or something, or somebody does a Godzilla article or a kaiju article in general, the fandom basically turns it into a big drinking game of how many mistakes did they make. Because they don't give a shit, and a lot of people just don't give a shit. It's like it's not viewed as an important genre because it's their hokey movies from the 60s with rubber suits in them, but like I said, you guys were giving it the old college try, and I really appreciated that. And that says a lot because, as opposed to like these writers on these websites who are paid to do this, and you guys can't do a Wikipedia search. Seriously, you're going to get the date wrong on Godzilla versus Destroyer, which exists in list form in about 40 different websites. So anyway, I'm not bitter. You're bitter. So no, I appreciated it, and I'm glad I could come on and talk to you guys a little bit.
Yeah, thank you so much. I really did try because, like, I mean, it's definitely something that like I'll reach out to you in the future for those resources because I like doing my research. But it's like I love monsters. I love monsters in all forms, little, big, small, medium. Awesome. I am at least happy we gave it a solid effort.
All I got is he got a few good shots in, but he wasn't on the floor trashed.
Yeah.
That's what I got.
A little tipsy.
There you go.
He isn't gone. Awesome. But thank you so much. So for those of you listening, I will include all of the extra information in the show notes for you. Make sure you check that out. Click on it. Buy some of the books that he does because I've seen the art because I may have spent a good hour looking through your DeviantArt profile. It's amazing.
Thanks. Keep an eye open for those of you listening, keep an eye open on my website because I will be posting when to get a hold of Redman soon because the first volume is called The Kaiju Hunter. So it's relevant to everyone's interests.
Yes, definitely. So as always, you can find the podcast at But Why Though PC on Twitter and on Facebook, facebook.com/ButWhyThoughPC. And you can find me at Oh My Myth Randier on Twitter. Matt?
That's awesome.
Matt?
You can find me in section 5.
Nice. Right on.
What kind of music do you want to go out to?
Yes.
We always do this for
our guests. I'm tempted to just say "Don't Fear the Reaper," but no, I'm gonna pick something a little more obscure. It's got to be something Godzilla related or Ultraman related.
You'd be surprised what people have chosen. It doesn't, honestly. I'd say it doesn't matter, but we've had some very obscure things.
Okay. I'm kind of tempted to just go out with "Don't Fear the Reaper." I think that would be nice.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, that's fair enough.